All right, we're just making sure that we are live. Says that we're getting there. Give us 1 second to make sure we're connected. Usually takes a second. It says we're live. Okay, looks like we are live. Okay, hi everyone. It's Alexa from Teaneck Creek Alley, and we are joined tonight by Levin, the author of Images of America, Teaneck, and we're going to be talking about the history of the town of Teaneck and what it takes to make a book like this and how you can get your own copy. So we want you to feel free to ask questions if you have them about Teaneck, about writing a book like this, or about getting your own. So I'm going to throw it over to Allie to begin our program tonight with our first question.
Wonderful. So Jay, we're so happy to have you here today. Obviously, our organization is in Teaneck, so this is an issue that is close to our own hearts and always on our minds. So we actually just wanted to start off by asking you to share a little bit about yourself.
I've lived in town for a little bit over 20 years. I'm not from New Jersey originally. I'm from Queens, but spent a lot of time also in California and Michigan and some other places. So I've been here 20 years, but in North Jersey for 35 years. And I worked at the Bergen Record as a reporter and editor for 21 years until about 4 years ago. So I'm kind of semi-retired now. So, but I live, we've been in Teaneck again for 20 years. We used to live in Bogota, and before that we lived briefly in Richfield Park. So I like to say I've been moving my way north.
So basically in the same, Bergen County area for your New Jersey
Same
venture.
exact area. I can walk to every other place that I've lived in.
That's great. So my next question for you is, what inspired you to put together a book like this?
Well, I wasn't inspired. I was asked to do it. The Teaneck Historical Society started or launched about a couple of years ago. And one of the officers, the treasurer of the society at the time, or the secretary, is Jackie Case. And she's well known in Teaneck. She was a mayor here for quite a few years. And I've known Jackie for quite a while. And she always wanted to have Teaneck represented in the Arcadia series, Images of America, as you see here. And this publishing company out of South Carolina does these local history books. They're pictorial books. And they've done about, I don't know, well over 100 on other towns in New Jersey. But they never did Teaneck. So Jackie contacted them and asked, how come you never did Teaneck? And they told her that it has to come from within. You need an organization to kind of sponsor it, get a writer, and just move the project along. So she reached out to me about 2 years ago now, and that's how we got started. I had an interest in local history. I've written about local history for the Record, and I was more than happy to do the book. And the thing about these books is that they're pictorial. If you don't have images, if you don't have photographs, you don't have a book. And Arcadia is very specific about the images that they'll allow you to use. You can't just use images off of the internet. You can't use electronic images. You need, real, honest to goodness, old photographs and postcards. And fortunately for me, and fortunately for Teaneck, the Teaneck Public Library over the decades has been given old photographs from townsfolk, and they stuffed a couple of filing cabinets with all of these photographs. So they gave me the run of the library, the run of those cabinets. So about a little bit more than half of the pictures in the book are from the archives of the library.
That's amazing. Yeah, and for those who have already seen the book or read through it, there are so many incredible photos that everyone definitely, yes.
Yeah. And I supplemented, I supplemented the pictures from the library with old postcards from a local postcard collection where Teaneck was well represented. And then I reached out to folks in the community, and I got a lot of great photographs from people's, basements and photo albums, and they were very. I even took some old photographs off of walls, and
wow.
put them out of frames. So it worked out. Usually these books have anywhere from about 170 to 220 pictures. I think I had about 190. But
Wow.
again, without the photos, you don't have the book.
And how long does it take for a book like this to be put together?
I started in January of last year, 2019. And or was it December of maybe the month before? It was January 2019, and my deadline was July. So I had about 6 months to put it together. And so I had to get all of the material, all of the pages, all of the images, all of the writing over to the publisher. I think it was July 15th of last year. And it takes them a while to actually publish the book. The book was published about 6 months later, which was this past January.
It's a quick turnaround time.
It is. It is.
So kind of, I guess, in all of that, in the creating portion of the book, what was your favorite part about that?
Well, I love for me, I love local history. I love old history, and I love old photographs. So I was like a kid in a candy store going through these file cabinets at the library, and the quality of the photographs were just amazing. They were vintage, they were original, they were in terrific condition, and it was just such a kick to dig into that and begin to choose what you want. And you can't use everything. I mean, there had to be a rhyme and a reason to how you put the book together. But
were there some hard choices made?
There are a lot of hard choices. A lot of things. If I had to do it over again, I would do differently. But I'm happy with the way it came out. But there were a lot of hard choices. Some of my favorite photographs in the book are some of the most kind of routine. On page 41, if you have the book, in chapter 2. I arranged the chapters kind of chronologically, and the chapters 2 was called Building Blocks. And that was kind of the period when Teaneck really began, developing, beginning around 1920. And there's a picture on page 41 of a beautiful Tudor house on Hudson Avenue. If you want to find it, Alexa, you can show everybody. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And if you look at that house, this is about a block or two from Whittier School. And you're looking at that house, and there's nothing around it. There's nothing around it because Teaneck was like fields and farms back in the 1920s. They put up this house as part of the, coming development in the West Englewood area. And if you go to Hudson Avenue now, as I did, I went there, and that house is still there. It is little changed. And of course, now it's completely surrounded by other houses, surrounded by trees. But back in the early 1920s, it just stood alone in like a field. So again, it's not the most dramatic picture, but it just really shows how far Teaneck has.
As something to easily see the change. This is a place you can go and look and see it change over time. That's wild. Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. Especially because when you think about how much has changed, and it hasn't even been that long when you really think about it. Teaneck was founded, it was 1894, right? Yeah, no,
Teaneck was incorporated as a township in 1895, which makes this year, 1920, the 125th birthday of Teaneck. So a lot of communities in Jersey incorporated around that time. 1894 is also a very popular a year that a lot of the boroughs, a lot of the towns incorporated as boroughs came to be. So that was a big period in New Jersey history. So yeah, we incorporated in 1895, and but Teaneck really didn't start kind of really growing until around 1920, and that's when a gentleman whose name is prominent in the book, William Walter Phelps. He was like Teaneck's most prominent citizen in the late 19th century. He was a congressman. He was an ambassador, and he moved here from New York and had a lovely old farmhouse that he kept on expanding, and he was wealthy, and he owned like everything. He owned all of the acreage, and he was the guy who was responsible for planting, I believe the figure was like 600,000 trees on his extensive property. So
Wow.
if you think Teaneck is known for its trees, it's because William Walter Phelps planted so many of them back in the late 1800s. He died right before Teaneck was incorporated, and his extensive estate, land holdings, were open to development in 1921. So that really boosted the growth of Teaneck, because you had this massive acreage ripe for development at around the same time that they were planning to build a huge bridge, the George Washington Bridge, from Bergen County to New York City. And that bridge, of course, opened in 31. So the period from like 1920 to 1930 was when everything began to happen in Teaneck.
It's like the boom.
The boom. I mean, the house I live in was on Griggs Avenue, was built in 1925. So a lot of the town was developed at that time. The older parts of town were tied to the trolley, and you'll probably see in the first chapter, and Alexa, if you want to hold up a picture of the trolley.
Sure.
Yes, that's actually particularly interesting to us, because Teaneck Creek is actually located in what used to be the Fike Woods. So we have a remnants of the trolley track.
The trolley ran from Edgewater on the Hudson River west towards through Hackensack, and even, on west of there towards Patterson. And Teaneck got its trolley station, which was put up, and there's a picture of it, at the corner of what is now DeGraw Avenue and Teaneck Road in 1899. And the guy who brought the trolley station, who was instrumental in bringing trolley service here to town, was William DeGraw. I have a picture of him there. He, unfortunately, the day of the introduction of the trolley service, the trolley ran over his foot, and he was getting off or on. And this was written about in the newspapers at the time. And he suffered an injury that became gangrene, and he died a couple of years later. But the trolley tracks through Teaneck, through the heart of Teaneck, ran along what is now DeGraw Avenue, named after William DeGraw. And that location is also where a lot of the much older homes in Teaneck are located, because Teaneck began to develop initially before 1920, along the trolley tracks. So streets like Copley Avenue, Oakdean Avenue have homes which are somewhat older than my house and the homes in West Englewood.
And what benefit did the trolley bring to the town? Why was it important there?
People were able to then commute to the city. If you worked in the city, I mean, there was also a train, but you could commute to Edgewater and take a ferry over to New York City. It was just another means of commutation. And if you worked in Hackensack, or if you worked out towards Patterson, you could take the trolley from Teaneck. This was, of course, now if you drive to Patterson from Teaneck, you take Route 4. Route 4 opened in the early 30s. And
when the trolley closed, because the trolley closed in the early 30s.
No, trolley closed. The books, I believe, in the late 30s. It was in the 1930s, and Route 4 probably did in the trolley, and also the emergence of bus routes. Buses also made the trolley obsolete.
Wow.
So the trolley was around for a good in Teaneck for a good 35, 40 years.
Yeah, and like Allie mentioned, we have still a rail from when it was there at Teaneck Creek, If anyone has been to the park, you may have noticed it. It sits adjacent to the Five Pipes. So that's a really interesting piece of history that still remains.
Alexa, if you could show everybody the picture of the trolley tracks embedded in DeGraw Avenue. Okay. That picture that Alexa is showing, this is from a postcard that I was able to acquire, and that's DeGraw Avenue.
So different.
The picture was probably taken at the intersection of Queen Anne Road and DeGraw, and it's looking west towards Pagoda. And that big house right on the left is actually, right now, that house is still there. And if you've ever gotten the great chicken wings at Peck Peck, that is where Peck Peck is, that very building.
Wow.
So I just wanted to point that out because I'm a big fan of Peck Peck's chicken.
This is not a sponsored video, no.
No.
It's funny though.
And the picture above it is the trolley going through the kind of the swampy area between Teaneck and Leonia on a track.
Basically the wetland property, like Teaneck Creek before Glen Point was there. That's what all of that area would have looked like. The high grasses and everything. It's wonderful. So cool. Okay. I had a question that you answered in the intro of the book, but where the name Teaneck actually comes from.
Yeah.
You had two kind of interesting possibilities of early settlers of Teaneck having named the area.
Yeah, the possibilities are either from the Lenape Indians or the Dutch. Of course, the Lenape were here before the Dutch. The Dutch got here in the 1600s, and I didn't go into great detail on this because I don't think there's a consensus whether the name is actually of an Indian origin or of a Dutch origin. So I deferred to Mildred Taylor. Mildred Taylor wrote really the definitive history of Teaneck in 1977. And Mildred was a former newspaper woman who was the Sunday editor of the Teaneck Sun, and or the editor or columnist at the Teaneck Sunday Sun. And she was kind of like a de facto historian. And at the beginning of her book, yes, that's Mildred right there. And she says that it either descends from Indian words Teaneck and neck, meaning place where there are woods, or Teaneck, Dutch, meaning neck of lands with willows. And, so she kind of like, she punted and said it's one or the other, and but it has nothing to do with tea. And I'm thinking it might be kind of Dutch because I know in New York City there's a street called Teaneck, T-E-N, two words, Teneeyck, which clearly is Dutch, which looks a lot like Teaneck.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking maybe it's more Dutch than Indian, but who knows? And who's even gonna know at this point? Either Dutch or Indian.
It is interesting. They both kind of relate back though to the area being a woodland property at some point. That's very common in at least both origins of the word. That would be an interesting way to think about Teaneck as a wooded area.
Yes.
And saving a lot of the wooded area in Teaneck.
Yes, I know you mentioned the willows. We do have willows in the park.
We're wet and swampy for willows there. So.
Yes. So I wanted to ask you next, Jay. So in the book, you start with the birth of the township and you move through the years to today's progressive suburb. What period of time was your favorite to learn about while writing the book?
My favorite was that the 1920s because so much was happening. And it really was, houses were being built, institutions were being created. During the 1920s, you had the municipal building, you had the high school, you had the hospital, Holy Name Hospital.
Yes.
Everything came, most of the major institutions in town were started in the 1920s. And then you had Route 4, right after that, in the early 30s. So, I mean, that's when Teaneck really began to become something. So that was my favorite era. And also some of the best photographs were from that era.
Some cool looking clothes. Good fashion. That's really interesting. What might be something that happened in Teaneck's history that you learned about that might shock people if they did not know about it happening in the town?
That happened in the town. I mean, there have been some shocking things that have happened in this town that didn't make the book. And, you know, I wanted the book to be as complete as possible. And the one, you know, probably the largest event that occurred here, at least in people's memory, is the shooting of African-American teenager Philip Pinnell by a white police officer in 1990. And that really challenged the beliefs that Teaneck was a very progressive melting pot type town, and resulted in a couple of nights of unrest, and was really a turning point in the history of Teaneck. Ordinarily, that might not have been represented in the book, because these Arcadia books tend to kind of, they like the books to be older rather than newer. So a lot of these books, you know, they kind of trail off or end in the 70s or so. But this happened in 1990. So I did ask the editors, or my editors there, whether I could extend the book into like the early 90s, and they said sure. So I wanted to do that, in able to photographically portray that terrible incident. So that was that was a shocking episode, and I wasn't living in Teaneck at the time. I was in Pagoda, but I certainly remember it well. One of the most shocking episodes that ever occurred in Teaneck, and I've written about it before for the Bergen Record, and it happened 45 years ago today, I believe.
Oh.
Today, or over the weekend, was the quintuple murder, unsolved murder of the Diggs family on Carlton Terrace. Mother and her 4 children, and it was never solved.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And I believe it's the largest unsolved murder in Bergen County history. But it was December 5th or 6th, that period in 1975. So I did not include that in the book. You know, there's a lot of unhappy stuff that's occurred in Teaneck, and
what would you say was a happy thing that you can think of that might have happened in the town that maybe people don't know, or is significant?
Probably one of the most positive things was Teaneck was the first American community, the first majority white American community to voluntarily desegregate its school system in the 1960s. So Teaneck is probably best known for that. And the way they did that was the Bryant School, in what was then an increasingly African-American neighborhood in Northeast Teaneck, became a central 6th grade school. So every 6th grader in town would be bused there, and the kids who would ordinarily go to that school from the neighborhood then were bused to other elementary schools throughout town. So that's how they achieved the integration of the school system, which happened after a lot of pressure from politicians and activists and many others in town who really felt that it needed to be done. And it happened, again, voluntarily. There were no courts involved. And Teaneck is probably best known for that. Less known is the fact that in 1949, 1950, Teaneck was designated by the U.S. Army as the model American community. And this was in the years after World War II. the Army wanted to show occupied Japan and other occupied countries really examples of US democracy in action, American democracy in action. And they sought to, it was like a contest, looking for a town that embodied democracy in action. And they chose Teaneck, and they sent over a camera crew for about a week, taking pictures of Teaneck, and this photographic exhibit was shown in Japan and elsewhere around the world.
Wow.
Teaneck was celebrated as the model American town.
And what features of Teaneck do you think made it the model American community?
Oh, probably the fact that it was a well-run town at the time. Very Paul Volcker was the town manager. He was a very skillful man who really, put Teaneck on a very solid path. There was a history at that time of town meetings, and it's just a town that worked, a town that did everything right, and so we got quite a bit of notice at that time.
Yes, that's a good reputation to have, honestly.
So I think we might have covered our next question, but I think, as you kind of mentioned, Teaneck is this melting pot of races, religion, and culture, and we really even see that, so admitted today. But what would you say is the greatest impact that diversity has on our community?
It's just made Teaneck a great place to live. I think the greatest impact of that is this is a great town to raise your family in. There's, you can raise your family in a town where your neighbors will be of a different religion, they'll be of a different culture. Everybody ostensibly gets along, and it's just a good town to grow up in. And I think that's I'm glad my kids grew up here. I didn't get the chance to grow up here, but my children did. And I think that's the cool thing about Teaneck's history of diversity, and it just makes it a strong town, makes it a great place to raise your family.
That's great.
Wonderful.
I actually do have some questions coming in from the audience.
Sure.
Susan said that she went to 6th grade at Bryan School, but was wondering what year the school system voluntarily introduced the desegregation.
It happened in the school board. The school board policy was 64, and then there was a slate of the following year. There was a slate of Board of Education candidates who were victorious, and they all were supportive of the plan. So that was 65. So it was 64, 65 was when this whole integration plan went into effect.
It's very interesting. And then do you know if it stayed that way? I guess for a while, and then they went back
that way for a while. Now Bryant's a kindergarten school.
Right.
It's the central kindergarten school.
So they still have the model in place in a way to kind of centralize everyone.
Yes.
Very interesting.
It is interesting. And then just also for everyone listening, could you tell us how people can purchase your book as well?
Oh, sure. The book is, well, you can buy it on Amazon, and just Google it and look for it on Amazon. The cover price is $23.99, but Amazon charges something different every day. I know they have it at Bishop's, the ice cream parlor on Cedar Lane, and there are actually also a very nice picture of Bishop's in the book. So please look for that. You can't do the book on Teaneck without having Bishop's in there. So you can buy it at Bishop's. I know it's at Briar Rose Books, but they have recently been closed because of the pandemic. And they are, I know I've seen it at Barnes & Noble in Hackensack, but I also have a lot of books from the publisher, and I can provide signed copies if you want to get in touch with me. And if you live in
Wonderful.
town, I'll deliver it right to your door. And the price of a signed copy is $20. And you can reach out to me through Facebook or email me at jaylevin19@gmail.com. And
I'm going to put that in our comments so that people
Sure.
can reach out.
But I do have copies here that I'd be happy to drop off and personally sign.
That's great. Susan also left another comment. She had said that her mother, Lucille Steiner, also served as councilwoman for 8 years for 2 terms in 1978. And she had known Jackie Cates and remembers her quite fondly. So
Yeah, Jackie is,
yeah.
Jackie was a mayor for quite a few years, and she's a terrific lady, and she still doesn't live in Teaneck anymore, but she's still very much involved with civic affairs here.
Oh, there's a question. Is there any interesting history about Bischoff's that you might know?
Interesting history about Bischoff's. Well, it's opened in 34. And
it's a long-standing small business.
Yes, and the guy who owns it now, Steve Mather, his great-grandfather started it. His great-grandfather was Mr. Bischoff's. And it's one of the oldest continuously operating small businesses in town. And if you want to take a look at Alexa, can you find that picture of Bischoff's here?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll look through the book.
Probably in the, I have it in the index. Let's see. Oh, 48, 49.
48, 49.
Okay. If you want to hold up the page 48, okay, on 49, that's the interior of the ice cream parlor when it first opened in 35, and the picture on the left on the left-hand side top, that was the corner where Bischoff's is now in 1935, and
wow.
You'll see it's something that says Grand Union. There was a Grand Union market there. That's now where the Provident Bank is.
Oh, wow.
And two doors away from there, next door, you'll see a little storefront that says Candy and Confectionery, and that is Bischoff's. So, and then we have a picture of Bischoff's, that corner, and Bischoff's today underneath. One of the cool things about the book is that they allowed me to include photographs, current day photographs, showing, like a street corner or a building then and now. So
I loved seeing the movie theater, how that's changed over the years. That's such iconic of Cedar Lane that it's so nice to see that still there,
Yeah, the movie theater was 1937. Wow. And so that got there a couple of years after Bischoff's.
It's a perfect afternoon movie and ice cream, I think.
Yes.
They got it right by opening up together. So I'm just going to ask anyone watching, if you have any questions, feel free to comment them in the comments. If we don't get to them in the video, we will do our best to answer them in comment form. Anyone else has any questions? We don't have any questions that are currently coming in. Some tidbits, though. Susan says that Bischoff's looked the same in the 60s as it did in the 30s. So I guess it's nice when you can recognize the places of your childhood and they're still the same.
Yes.
Nice. Susan just asked, when did Teaneck begin to get more diverse?
Teaneck began to get more diverse in the 1950s. The early 1950s is when the African American community began to move into the northeast part of the town, and the Jewish population of Teaneck also began to grow quite a bit, around that time, the 1950s. So that was after the war, after World War II. Teaneck, which had been a largely Christian town, really began to really diversify to the point now where we have really a very vibrant African American community, a vibrant Orthodox Jewish community. We have a vibrant Muslim community here. We have a couple of mosques in town. We
have a prominent Latino community as well.
Latino community as well, Filipino community. About 14 or 15 Orthodox synagogues, I believe, at least a dozen Orthodox synagogues. So yeah, Teaneck is known for its diversity, and I think many of us who live in town just know it just from our streets, just from our immediate neighborhoods. And again, that's one of the great things about living here and about raising your kids here.
Here's another question that just came in. What are some celebrities that are featured in your book?
Oh, okay. I do have quite a few celebrities in the book. Not that they've actually lived here. Muhammad Ali is in the book. His daughter, one of his daughters, grew up in Teaneck. So he occasionally was a presence in town, and I have a great picture of him kind of play boxing with the principal of Whittier School in the 1980s.
Oh, wow.
Rosa Parks visited also in the 1980s. She was here for an all-day program. And let's see, Elston Howard, a great New York Yankee, lived in town for many years. Jim Bouton, another Yankee, lived in town. There were also other people in the entertainment business who I didn't even mention in the book, who I later learned and realized were in town. If you know the name, the folk singer Phoebe Snow, she was Phoebe Laub, Laub, and she grew up in Teaneck and graduated from Teaneck High School. So we've had quite a few famous people in and out of Teaneck.
That's awesome. Someone just commented, Bob from Sesame Street.
Bob from Sesame Street.
Yes.
Yeah, Bob McGrath. He doesn't live here anymore. He moved out fairly recently, but he's in the book also. He's on page 125, Bob McGrath. And he was he did programs in the schools. He would show up and do things with kids at the programs for kids at the farmer's market. So, and until fairly recently. So yes, he was certainly a big part of Teaneck as well.
Getting a lot of suggestions of people, I guess, that have lived in Teaneck as well. People are commenting or had visited JFK. I did see a picture of JFK in the book when I went through.
JFK, he campaigned here a couple of days before the 1960 election at the Armory, Teaneck Armory, a big campaign event. LBJ, his running mate, a couple of weeks before JFK was here, he campaigned at Fairleigh Dickinson University in Teaneck. So Teaneck was a stop for both of those guys during the 1960 campaign, which was not surprising because in 1960, New Jersey was a so-called battleground state. And, JFK carried it by a very thin margin over Richard Nixon. And of course, he defeated Nixon in that presidential election.
Right. Wow.
Hmm.
That's very cool to know that he had at least visited, even if for a short period. Very iconic to have that picture even. There was just a comment, someone said, and I know I was interested because it related somewhat to Teaneck Creek, that someone had lived on East Oakdean and their house had been, torn down. And Teaneck Creek, now we're Puffin Way from the Puffin Foundation, but the extent of the road had been East Oakdean, that would cut through the Fightwood property. So it's interesting to note, we don't have a full picture. I mean, there's ideas of, everything that had been where Teaneck Creek currently is today, in the Fike Woods, and everyone has called it that. And I know a lot of people had grown up playing out in the woods down there and all that. So it's always interesting to hear of what was developed and now removed and now going back to nature. Current day history at Teaneck Creek is we're under full restoration to bring it back to the wetlands that it once was, instead of the dump site it was slated to be. So it's just so interesting to know that there had potentially been houses even in the vicinity. And I know you had mentioned the corner of DeGraw Ave and Teaneck Road was where the DeGraw family had lived. Their house is where that medical building is, right on the corner of where Teaneck Creek property hit. So it's just so interesting to think of what had been in places that we now are noticing every day today. So
another intersection not far from there near the creek is Teaneck Road and Fike Lane, which is right near Thomas Jefferson Middle School. And at that corner now is an automotive, I think it's like an automotive garage. They don't have gas pumps, but it's like a service center.
Mm-hmm.
If you look again in the book, let's see what page we're looking at there. Oh dear. Let's see. Okay, page 21.
Mm-hmm.
And this is pretty interesting. And this was, these pictures were also courtesy of not the library, but from a resident of town. The Cancro family, a very large family of the Cancros, lived at that corner. And they created the service station, like a filling station, which you see there on the bottom of the page. Mm-hmm. And that's where the service center is now. And they lived on the site right above. If you want to lower the book a little bit, there's the family in front of their house right at that point. So that's a family that really settled on that corner and created a business. And that business, it's not the same business, but it's remained an automotive business all these years. And they came in the, I believe that picture was from the 1920s. And I received that from a family member still in town.
Wow. And then we also had another comment from Shannon, who asked about Theodora Lacey, who the new school is named after.
Theodora Lacey, yeah. Theodora Lacey was my son's teacher at TJ. But more importantly, she's really one of the most important people in the history of Teaneck. And she was she really helped push the integration of the school system. She was the person who brought Rosa Parks, who was a family friend of hers in Alabama, to visit the school system in the 80s. Theodora was also instrumental in creating the Martin Luther King Memorial.
Oh, wow.
Actually, it's a statue, a memorial just across from Teaneck over that bridge at FDU on the other side of the Hackensack River from Teaneck. So Theodora still lives in town. I see her from time to time, and just an incredible lady and a well-deserved honor having that new school named after her.
It's amazing. Yeah. We have a lot of comments from people saying that they've lived in Teaneck their whole life and talking about their grandparents. Alan mentioned that his grandmother was born in Teaneck in 1912 and lived there from birth on the division of Glen Street where Glen Point is. So interesting to see.
Division Street.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Okay.
Division Street.
Yeah.
Pardon me. It's interesting to see how many people have all these connections to all different places across Teaneck.
There's another interesting picture where on page, let's see, page 123. And the Glen Point was of course, a huge hotel, office, townhouse project that was developed in the 70s and 80s. And there's an aerial picture there of what the site looked like before,
Wow.
you know, construction got underway. This was probably from the 60s or 70s. And you could see that's,
This is Teaneck Creek. This is the park right here.
That's Teaneck Creek.
Yeah.
And there, you know, there's Overpeck Creek
Mm-hmm.
in the, you know, on the top of the page. That's road there. That's DeGraw Avenue or Fort Lee Road or whatever. I think it's called Fort Lee Road at that point. And the turnpike should be somewhere there.
That's cutting right back through here.
Yeah, the turnpike should be there. But that was just a very, you know, kind of a swampy, mushy area.
Yeah.
And that Glen Point project really helped put Teaneck on the map. I think Teaneck right now might have more hotel rooms than most towns in Bergen County, between the Marriott, which used to be the Lowe's, and now we have 2 years ago another huge hotel tower opened right across the street. So you have probably at least 600 hotel rooms at that site. So right off the turnpike.
That's crazy too. And that's so good for people who are visiting here for business and everything like that.
Yes, yes. And it's also great when you're trying to give directions to how people can get to Teaneck from someplace else. That's like a terrific landmark, is when just get off when you get off the highway when you see the 3 hotels.
Usually it's a good indicator, even though Teaneck Creek has been a park in existence since 2001, oftentimes we hear from people that have lived in Teaneck, I've never heard of that. Where is it? And I can say it's directly behind Glen Point. And that seems to be the kind of North Star of where people understand where to go to find us. It's right behind Glen Point. It's become an iconic location within town.
And Teaneck's other probably well-known park that many people know is Votee Park, named after a former mayor. And what many people don't know is that Votee Park used to be named Central Park.
Oh, really?
It was Central Park, and then they renamed it after Milton Votee, who was a prominent mayor of Teaneck.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that at all. That is very interesting. So I'm just looking through.
I don't see any other questions coming. Oh, someone mentioned 2 airplanes had crashed at the location.
Oh yes, the airplanes. I actually wrote about that for the record at one time, and the pictures remained in the library. 8 years apart, there was a plane crash at the exact same intersection of Queen Anne Road and Cherry Lane. This is close to the high school, and kind of between Route 4 and Cedar Lane. Residential street, Cherry Lane intersects with Queen Anne Road. And in 1942, a couple of military planes during the war were doing some maneuvers or training exercises over Teaneck, and they collided. And the pilots bailed out, and they were fine. And the planes crashed. And one of the planes crashed into the garage at 890 Queen Anne Road at the corner of Cherry Lane. And the picture, if you can, Alexa, if you can find the picture, I think it's in. Oh, it's very, very dramatic. Let's see. Oh yeah, page 70. So it took out the garage, and then yeah, here we go. That's the one on. It's the one on the top.
Wow.
Now that was also the family who lived there. The father owned the Tracy family, and they owned a restaurant in Little Ferry that was well known. And 8 years later, a plane out of Teterboro crashed, developed engine problems, and crashed into the intersection of, again, Queen Anne Road and Cherry Lane. And if you want to move that up, you'll see that plane crash. That plane is the tail is sticking up out of the intersection.
Wow.
So there you have 2 plane crashes that occurred on the same intersection. The other military plane fell on Dartmouth Road and did not hit any houses that in the 1942 crash. From what I believe, I think those were 2 of the 3 plane crashes in the history of Teaneck. The other crash was a small plane that kind of had engine problems and crashed or crash landed in a parking lot at FDU. And that happened in 1979. But not nearly as dramatic as the ones that occurred in 1942 and 1950.
And what a phenomenon too, in the same spot. That's crazy. Yeah. Huh.
Okay. Well, we are just about at our time and we don't have any other questions coming in. But if they do, we will do our best to answer them in the comments. So if you continue to have questions and you're watching this and we didn't get to cover them, feel free to ask away and we will make sure to get them answered in the comments for you about either the history of Teaneck, how to get the book, more about the process of writing the book or anything like that that you might have questions on. Jay, I think you're happy to help us answer some of those questions. So thank you. And thank you all for watching tonight and Jay for being with us tonight and talking about the history.
Thank you.
As some of you may know, Teaneck, one of Teaneck Creek's mission pillars is history and keeping the culture and history of our watershed alive. So we are thrilled to be able to have conversations like this with you to talk about history and more about the area of Teaneck as a great location to everyone seems to love growing up in, and I know Allie and I enjoy working in. So thank you all for letting us come into your town and talk about it with you. So I think we are going to end the Zoom right now. It will be available again. You can rewatch on Facebook or on our YouTube page. And like I said, leave any questions that you may have in the comments. So thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.